And we're back. It's Steve Sanborn in Kansas City, Missouri, with my good pal, Karen Russo, also of Kansas City, Missouri. I always like to try to make sure that people realize that we're not in Kansas City, Kansas. All right. Nobody needs to be there. That's just not necessary. Kansas City, Missouri, that's where it's happening. Today, we're talking more and in an ongoing way about Karen's work providing medical documentation, the advanced directive, the living will concept that some people are familiar with. All that kind of stuff gets cleared up. We're going to do it in about 15 minutes this time. We had some longer videos in the past that are posted. I'll put those links into the description of this if you would like to look for more information on that. So Karen, the object here is to kind of give sort of a summary for those who have greater interest for themselves and their loved ones to create the armored car, as you describe it, the armored car of advanced directive packages. And why you do it quickly, I think probably best described in the story that we talked about earlier. I know you have a few experiences in the last week or so that were got real high on your radar. So why don't you tell us a little bit about those, and then we'll take it from there.
Okay. The first issue that I was made aware of was a friend of mine in southeastern Missouri in a county I'm not going to divulge. I'm not going to divulge his name or the hospital that he's in. I will say that the hospital you shouldn't take anybody to. He called me, I don't know, maybe a year or so ago, and asked me to put his end of life documents in place, which I did. I explained to him in detail what those documents meant because he needed to know what they are. A lot of people have them, but they don't know really what's in them. The life care interlock documents number about that the advanced directive and medical power of attorney are two documents in one, and they number 11 to 12 pages. So they're very detailed. They are custom fit for every individual, and they are all state compliant because each state has different rules, regs, and laws. So after we put those in place, I didn't hear from him for quite a while until Thursday or Friday of this last week. And we've got a problem. And I said, what's the problem? Well, I have a wound on my foot that the doctor here says he's going to have to amputate my foot all the way through up to the instep in my foot. And I go, what for? And he said, well, the wound is pretty severe. I'm not a brittle diabetic, but I have diabetes type 2. And I said, well, do you have pictures? And he sent me a picture, and I can tell you, just from dealing with the prison system for 30 some odd years, there was only one other instance where I should have never asked for pictures when I did. And this is the same instance. It's one of those things where you're looking at pictures and you wish you couldn't see it because you can't forget what you saw.
Yeah.
And I can say that his foot looked like mangled hamburger. And I didn't want to sound, horrified, but I said, where are you? And he goes, I'm home on an air pressure, whatever they call it, the air pressure pump for my foot.
Yeah.
And I'm on heavy duty antibiotics. And he said, what I'm calling you for is I would like to see an expert in this discipline of health up in Kansas City. And I said, well, my advice, if you want it, he goes, I do. You need to get in the car and go to Mayo Clinic. That wound right there is what they need to be doing. And he said, I hear you, but I would like the expert in Kansas City first. So I gave him 4 names. I don't know if he's gotten a hold of them, but I rounded back around on the conversation, and I said, since you're a diabetic, did you know that you were a diabetic prior to the wound? He said, yes. And I said, did they adjust your insulin? Were they doing something? He goes, well, I lost my job, I lost my insurance, and I couldn't afford the medication. So I've been without this medication for 7 months, ergo the problem. And then I realized this is one of those nuances the majority of people don't realize, especially if you've lost a job or whatever the financial situation may be. When you're destitute like that and you can't get life-saving medication, What the doctor should have told him was that they could have put him in contact with the manufacturer of the drug that he was on. And they have assistance programs for individuals like this. You go through hoops and hurdles to fill out the form, this, that, and the other. Bottom line is you get this drug for free. And I asked him, I said, did they ever tell you anything like that? He goes, no, I've never even heard of it. There you go. One of the key things that I do when these life care interlock documents are in place, if the patient or the client stays close, and by close I mean when things are happening, they're letting me know in real time. If that document has to kick in, I want them to know how that kicks in. But I not only want them to know how it kicks in, I want that medical power of attorney that they've designated, that person needs to know that it kicks in. And I don't know where this is going to stand right now. I don't know. But I do know that hospital that shouldn't even be deemed a hospital knows that these documents are in place. And all of a sudden, when he brought that up again, they're panicking a little bit. And by that, I mean, when I say panicking, the doctor wants to know why he doesn't want to have his foot amputated or his toe amputated. Does he think that he was not given an adequate health care? Were you not given information that you needed on the front end to make determination? Blah, blah, blah. All these questions, all of a sudden, after 7 months, are manifesting in the last 72 hours. I said, there's a reason for that. I said, you've reminded them where that document is, which points to the fact in one of the one-on-one consulting things that I do, when you give these documents to a healthcare staff, whether it's a doctor, a nurse, or a hospital administrator, 9 times out of 10, they are so used to reading standard, substandard, end-of-life documents that people are pulling off the internet or some lawyer has made, that they're all saying the same thing that doesn't change. Life care interlock documents don't operate that way. They transcend the traditional definition of an end-of-life document because they're not just end of life. Our documents kick in before end of life or before you have a terminal disease. So it's one of the reasons why I call it an armored car. There are 4 documents that number that life care interlock armored car packet. The first 2 are the advanced directive and medical power of attorney that are combined, and then the 2 additional documents interlock and interconnect with those 2. So any kind of wiggle room or hoop that a system or a doctor wants to attempt to not treat or not give answers or not do this, that, or the other, I checkmate those through those documents. That's why I call it an armored car. We've taken the wiggle room out of that. So I don't know where this gentleman stands at the moment. I'm kind of waiting to see what he's going to do next. My fear is I'm going to guess he's going to have to lose part of that foot just because of the way that looked. I may be wrong. I'm not a doctor, but he's let it go too long.
Yeah.
So that is one thing. Did you want another?
Yeah, I do. I think I just wanted to make some comments that, you know, in thinking about what you said, that, you know, the details that you're providing here on a case-by-case basis really matter. You know, it may, quite frankly, to a listener out there or a viewer might say, okay, I get it. But no, it's important to know individual cases and all the details that make up that case and how those things play out in front of practitioners who I would argue are oftentimes somewhat not devoid, but they're a little desensitized when it comes to your needs as a patient. They do this every day. Does that mean that's true of all of them? No, it doesn't. But I think that, you know, case in point, a practitioner doesn't think to tell this guy that he's got options for medication. How does something like that happen? He knows, as a practitioner, he knows what the outcome will be if this man does not take the medication, yet he does not think to mention it. He or she, I don't know who his practitioner is. So, you know, that's a problem. And as people hopefully spend a little time with this stuff and learn, they may spot certain details that they say, wait a minute, that happened to my uncle, or that's happening to my cousin right now, or whatever the case may be. And having those documents, that armored car, as you go in to that facility, typically referred to as a hospital, you need them. You've got to have them. You don't know what's going to happen when you're there. You
No,
don't
you don't.
know what could happen. So yes, I do want to hear of some other circumstances or some other case studies.
Well, and on the heels of what you're saying, I think what medical staffers hold the belief is the majority of patients and family members don't, well, I shouldn't say don't ask questions. They hold back the questions because they think the doctor knows what he's doing and they rely on them to be doing X, Y, Z for the patient. Now, I'll take that. I'll take that as long as it makes sense and as long as I'm able to ask questions of that physician as to the whys and why you're doing certain things, why that medication. If families ask those questions and they're not getting answers or they're getting pushback because they've asked the question, that's an automatic red flag. Because I do hold the belief that the healthcare industry today is not what it was 30 years ago. 30 years ago, you're looking at a completely different system. Today, I will say this, especially with the prison healthcare system, which I basically have said since 2000, the public is succumbing to prison healthcare. I've said it 23 years ago, and it's manifesting right now.
Yeah.
The prison healthcare system contract providers, which are big business, are pro Department of Correction, anti-patient. Their whole modus operandi is cost containment. That's what it is out here. So if I have an individual, here's the second example, female inmate out of West Virginia, dying of hepatitis C. The system knows when an inmate reaches a crisis mode, they've got to ship her out of that facility. And this goes not just for this individual. Most prisons do not want these inmates dying on site. If they die on site, by law, that prison has to report that death as happening on the prison. Now, government keeps track of deaths, inmate deaths especially, and they want to know how many deaths are occurring within the prison system. If they can get an inmate to drop dead outside of the prison system, that's all great, because then the DOC is off the hook. Whether that inmate has been dead for 4 hours in a cell, they will call EMTs and paramedics into that cell. These guys know this guy is deader than a doornail, and by their training alone, they have got to do end-of-life measures to bring him back, even though he's not there. So everybody around him knows he's dead. But when they see the guy leaving with IVs and all of this stuff on, they say, well, maybe he's alive. They pronounce that guy dead on the way to the hospital. So now you've got a dead inmate on the way to the hospital, and that death is attributed to the hospital in the county where the hospital is, not the county where the prison is. And they make sure to transport these guys out of county. Here's where I'm going with this. This gal was transported to an outside hospital. Mom and dad had life care interlock documents in place before it happened. And when they finally got to the hospital and were allowed to see her, which took some doing, they had already presented the primary care physician, the nurse's station, and the hospital administrator with those documents. When they got into the room to see her, the primary care physician came in, looked at mom and dad, explained to them what her condition was. He was very, very professional, very polite, got mom and dad off to the side, and he goes, I am holding her advance directive and medical power of attorney. He goes, if you don't mind me asking you, where did you get these? And my clients are told to stay quiet. I want them to get all of the glory. I want that system to realize how smart my clients are. My job is to educate them in order to know how to use that document. I want them to know exactly what to say, when to say it, when a pushback comes. I want them to know the ins and outs of every trick and trap that they're going to try. He didn't do that. He basically said, I've never seen one like this. Wherever you got it, it is the best one I've ever seen, and we cannot not honor it. Now, what that meant to that family was the prison system is only going to pay for X number of days for her to be in that hospital. When that contract is up, let's just say it's 10 days. When that 10 days is up, that warden is going, we need her back into the prison system. And mom and dad went to that hospital administrator and basically said, don't even think about it.
Right.
Whatever you have to do to tell that warden she needs to stay here, that needs to be in place. Now, what's interesting is once those documents are in place, the warden has no say so. If they weren't in place, he's the one that can demand her body be sent back to prison. He can demand, if those life care interlock documents aren't in place, he can demand to take her off of the ventilator and let her die without parents' knowledge or authorization. So all of these were in place. They did not cut her loose in 10 days. They kept her for 3 weeks. And she died peacefully in the hospital rather than suffering back in the prison. That's the power of those documents. That's in prison, outside of prison. And these documents work like that on a personal basis for people like you and me. But you got to know how to use them.
Yeah. So key to that part of this discussion is if the documents work that well in the type of scenario that you just described, then imagine what they can do for the average family or the average folks out there who are trying to protect a loved one in an unforeseen set of circumstances, having all that in advance. And I've kind of lived that, and I've told that story several times, but to sum it up, the person who asked me to be the medical power of attorney for her, that was 15 years ago, right? Several years went by, nothing was needed. And then all of a sudden it was. I had no way of knowing 10 years later that somebody was going to try and kill her by starving her to death in a nursing care facility. And that happened. So having them in advance, advance directive, right? Having this stuff set up in advance for the unknown. You can't know. We're all confident when we're strong and healthy, but suddenly all that gets wiped off the table when we're not anymore, or when a loved one isn't anymore, and now they face a potential threat. In addition to being sick, now they're being treated like a widget, potentially. And if you're not ready for that in advance, then what are you going to do? It has to be done. So that takes me to my last question for the moment, so we can try to keep our offer up front. And that is the choice of the medical power of attorney and the importance of picking the right person. So mom and dad in that case were the obvious choice, but it sounds to me like they did a good job and they knew what to do, and you were probably guiding them to some extent, which is part of what you do with these packages, is to help people to use them effectively. What does that medical power of attorney type of person have to look like?
They've got to be well-versed and knowledgeable, and they need to understand not only the mechanics of the healthcare industry, they have to understand how they're operating towards the patient, towards the loved one. If you don't choose an agent that is aggressive and that knows your wishes as they are reflected in those documents inside and out, and they don't understand your underlying reasons and rationale for the motives behind your document, you're going to have a problem. They have got to be aggressive. They have got to be responsive to medical comments and protocols or treatment regimens that they may want to do. And if the person that they're being an agent for can't speak, there should be no question in their mind what that individual wants done. It's just an automatic, I know what he wants done, this is going to be it. No, you're not doing it. Or yes, go ahead and do it.
Right.
That most medical powers of attorney, when they're chosen, are usually family members, and that's just fine. If you've got a family member that can walk and chew gum and isn't shy and is not going to go into the fetal position and sit in a corner when a doctor come in basically says we're going to do this, 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 and this without questioning that, that is a family member you do not need as a medical power of attorney. Now, you can have more than one medical power of attorney. You can have up to, I like 3. I don't like more than 3. But if you have 3 whom you have chosen for different reasons, 2 out of the 3 have to agree. Now, if you don't have, there's another, let me just interject one thing. I did these documents just this last week for 3 brothers. I asked them because I was curious. Up until now, did you know that you needed these documents in place? And I don't like the term end of life documents, because they're really not end of life documents.
Yeah.
Traditional end of life documents are basically when you can't talk for yourself or you are terminally ill. Life care interlock documents transcend that definition because I don't use that. I want these documents kicking in even when you're alive and well and sitting in a hospital bed. I want that agent right there with you all the time, listening, processing, asking questions. Because again, the documents number in 4, all 4 of them interlock with one to the other, and you're going to have the authority for that agent to ask anything he or she wants without question from a medical person. So when you have that in place, you want, well, number one, they're not used to that. When they see the advance directive and the medical power of attorney, now they know that the whole thing is shifted. I take the power away from the doctors, I take it away from the hospital, and I put squarely in the seat or in the lap of the patient and the agent. Now, that doesn't mean that the doctor isn't good at what he does. It doesn't mean that the protocols and the treatment regimens are wrong, but it does mean I'm going to start asking you questions if I don't understand. And if the person I'm being an agent for doesn't get it for whatever reason, and a good example is if they're on pain meds, heavy duty pain meds that affect their thinking ability and their way to process things, that is a compromised state. You can't go to an individual like that, as some hospital staffers have done, and ask them under those conditions, well, would you like to put a DNR in place? Or I don't see that you want to be an organ donor on your advance direct. Would you like to change that?
Yes.
Not
Right.
good, not good at all. So that's why the agent in our documents are specified to be there for anything. All that power goes to the patient and the agent, not anything else. And it's spelled out like that. There's no question about any of it. So these 3 guys, I said, were you thinking about this before? He goes, no. I said, why? 3 different answers. One was, well, I thought family were the ones that could make those decisions automatically. And I thought that they would always do the right thing. That's a naive approach, because family members, whether you have one of these, well, if you don't have one of these in place, in some states, they'll go to family members. But here's the problem. Family members rarely agree. If you've got 3
Right.
family members and you're all trying to figure out what everybody wants done and you're all disagreeing, what they don't realize is the hospital is watching the time and the money. If you don't come up with a decision within their time frame, they're going to take the decision away from you. And the physicians and the hospital staff or the medical ethics boards are going to be calling the shots, not your family member. That goes and serves the same concept if you don't have them in place at all. If you don't have them in place for an 18-year-old son or daughter, and something happens to that son or daughter, whether it's an accident or a traumatic event or whatever it may be, if these documents aren't in place, as a parent, you've got 0 authority. You can't
Right.
make decisions. You can't call the shots. You can't okay certain treatments. You can't get medical records. People are
Right.
not aware of this stuff. And so the other excuse that one of the brothers gave was, I thought if I put these documents in place, it basically says, let me die. I could not understand that, but that was his answer. And
Oh, I
then the
see.
third one was they all did not want to face their own mortality, which is the big one. People don't think about how short their life is and how fast something can happen to them when you walk out the front door.
Yeah.
So having these documents in place not only is an armored car to ensure good quality health care for you, it also helps the loved ones that you have designated as agents to do what you want done without stress, without anxiety, without confusion, without guesswork, without guilt. That's a key
Right.
thing.
Right. Okay. Well, that's excellent information as always. And I think it's just more food for thought for people who may stumble upon our little video here. I mean, as I say often, this is not some big channel or anything. This is really more, at this particular phase anyway, just a way to try to share it with friends, family members, etc. Doesn't have to just be local to Kansas City, obviously, anywhere in the country. If you know somebody who really should have these, and everybody should, but if somebody's in a situation where they may be preparing, I mean, this is crazy. I just had a friend tell me, hey, I'm going in for something in a couple, like 2 days or a day and a half. What do you think I ought to do? And I'm like, buddy, call me when you're done. So that when the next time this happens, you can be better prepared. Right. But who's to say that everything will always go well? When you walk into a hospital for procedures or whatever, anything can change. And that's kind of part of the point. But as I said earlier, the previous videos we have done will be listed in the description of this one if you would like to get over to those to learn even more. And we can pick it up the next time. I think for the next video module that we do, we'll start with what people do once the documents are in place, right? There's next steps that may fall in after these are completed, signed, filed, etc. And we'll pick up on that the next time. So Karen, thank you very much again for joining
Thank
and
you for having me.
educating folks.
Yeah, my pleasure.
All right, we'll talk again.
All right, bye.
Bye-bye.